Hello, sir.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Excellent.
So just to introduce myself, I'm First Lieutenant Kendall Grosgold. I know it says Jagger Osek down there at the bottom.
Hello, sir.
But
Hi,
this,
how are you?
sorry, one
I'm great.
I'm so sorry about that. I had the stream running in the background. So basically, this is not my Zoom account. That's why it says Jagger Osek. But I'm currently working with CPC as kind of an audiovisual instructor, helper person, just kind of filling in. So basically, how this is going to work, you have starting at 1 o'clock, you'll have 50 minutes to do your presentation. And unfortunately, you're not going to be able to hear anyone that's in the world. But I have the chat open on one of my other computers, and I'll be getting messages from them. So if anyone has questions,
Okay.
get them from me.
Perfect.
Awesome. Do you have any questions for me or anything before we start? Because we still have like 10 minutes before.
Okay, so what did you say your name was?
Kendall Grosgold.
Awesome. So tell me about yourself. So I'm not as familiar with the Civil Air Patrol as I probably should be.
Right. So yeah, so I joined Civil Air Patrol, which is the Air Force Auxiliary. I
Yep.
joined when I was 12, which is the youngest that you can join. I started out really early. And then I actually just turned 21 a couple of months ago. And when you turn 21, thank you. When you turn 21, you automatically transition to be a senior member. So now I'm a first lieutenant, technically, instead of a cadet. And right now, I'm living in San Luis Obispo in California, like Central Coast area.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to school at Cal Poly in SLO, studying architectural engineering. I'm in my fourth year. Yeah, that's the
Good for
main
you.
thing.
Good
Yes,
for you. And
thank
and so what do you feel like Civil Air Patrol did for you in terms of your personal growth and development?
Oh, so much. Honestly, it sounds kind of cliche, but I am so incredibly grateful for being in CAP. Um, I when I joined CAP, I was like a little kid. I was super short. I was tiny. I kind of got picked on for it.
Yeah.
But when I joined CAP, I was able to kind of find my own voice and figure out how to like stand up straight and stand up for myself. And one thing that I loved, I realized that I was actually pretty good at drill and ceremonies.
Yeah.
So it was great that like outside of CAP, maybe I was like getting picked on, but in CAP, people would come to me for help with drill, and people like valued my opinion, which was just so awesome. And then because of that, I was able to get staff positions. And now I consider myself kind of a
Mhm.
good public speaker.
Mhm.
And I'm so glad that I am. Because the number of times that I've had to like give presentations in school and stuff like that.
Right.
And it's something that it doesn't really phase me anymore. And I'm able to just do it and be comfortable in front of a crowd. But yeah, I love CAP. My best friends I met in CAP, um, and like the memories that I have. I mean, obviously, I've stuck around for
Right.
9 years at this point. Um, it's just I know that CAP is not for everybody, but
Mhm.
for the people that really enjoy it, it's such a great family. It's such a great learning environment. It's awesome.
So what's the commitment like? What do they teach you? Do you have to what's the involvement?
Sure. So there's a bunch of different levels of involvement depending on how much time you have, what you're willing to put into it. The most basic level is going to your weekly squadron meetings. So you'll find your local unit, and most squadrons meet either Monday through Thursday night. So my squadron, for example, we met on Wednesdays. Um, but you go to your weekly meetings, and when you first start out, it's just going to be you show up, and there's a schedule, and maybe you're doing an aerospace education class, or maybe you have character development, or you're doing drill, or you're doing PT, just different stuff every meeting. So that's like the most basic, is just you go every week for like 3 hours, and that's your commitment. But once you start getting a little bit higher up, you can be on staff in your squadron,
Mhm.
and that will entail staff meetings. You're going to be scheduling classes for your flight, stuff like that. And then outside of your squadron, how CAP is set up. So the squadron is like the base unit,
Yep.
and the group has a couple of squadrons. So I'm from Group 7 in Southern California.
Mhm.
And then we have the wing, which is the whole state. And then obviously region, which is the states that are next to you. So Pacific region, where I'm from, is like California, Nevada, Alaska, those states. And then national. And there's activities at every level. You can have just small little weekend schools,
Mhm.
um, which are like basic cadet school, airman training school. You go for 2 nights, just kind of basic stuff. But then you can get higher up. And this event, actually, Cadet Programs Conference, while this year it's basically a national event, we have people from the whole country. We have 33 states that are
Yep.
represented. And we have people from out of the country also, which is
Yeah.
crazy.
That's
Um,
cool.
but CPC typically is a wing level event just for California. Um, and last year I had the honor of being the cadet commander for Cadet Programs Conference, which was the best experience. I loved it. And then there's the other main thing that each wing does is an encampment, which is our version of like boot camp. It's a
Uh-huh.
week-long event, where students will come and learn everything: drill and ceremonies, uniform. We have barracks inspections, the whole 9 yards. Um, and encampment is one of my favorite events. I've been to 7 encampments, I think, maybe 6. I can't remember.
Yeah.
Uh, but California Wing we have ours every summer. We unfortunately weren't able to have it last year because of lockdown stuff, but some wings have encampment over winter. I know that Oregon and Washington do winter encampments.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, so those are state level events. So it really just depends. You can be as involved as you want to be,
Mhm.
or as not involved as you want to be. It's just whatever you sign up for, whatever you're interested in. And that's kind of on the cadet program side. CAP has 3 main missions. So it's cadet programs, which was like
Mhm.
the leadership stuff, emergency services, and then aerospace education.
Mhm.
And you can be super involved with aerospace education and emergency services as well. I'm not personally, but aerospace education, we have tons of opportunities to fly. People are able to get their pilot's license for incredibly cheap and incredibly quickly.
Wow.
Um, we have emergency services stuff, which actually during lockdown has been a huge deal. They've been doing a lot of food bank work, transporting stuff for the Red Cross, things like that. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunities to do whatever you're interested in. I just happen to like cadet programs the most.
That's amazing. So it sounds like it's really a great opportunity for civic engagement, leader development. Um, it's not, well, not being familiar with it. It sounds like a lot like scouting programs
Yeah,
in
yeah, kind of. It's
terms of
essentially the same foundation, like
right,
building those morals, getting those core values. We happen to wear a uniform while we're
right,
doing it, and
yeah,
call people sir and ma'am and chief and all of that.
very cool, very cool. So what I was going to do today is essentially just kind of tell my story.
Awesome.
Uh, Talk about who I am, my education, my background, kind of why I came into the military, why I've stayed, so that gives people an idea of what one model of success might look like. Acknowledging it's not the only one, but I can tell my story, and then talk a little bit about some tips and tricks, things I've learned, and just some life lessons, things that have helped me. and talk about my current duties and responsibilities, and then maybe that should probably take about 25 minutes, and then stop and see if people have questions.
Perfect. That sounds great, sir.
Okay.
Let me check in with the people in the world and see how we're doing. I think we're still waiting for just one more minute for people to come back from lunch and take a seat. And then I will let you know as soon as they introduce you, and then we can get started.
Okay. And my first name is pronounced Sean. People always, if they haven't heard it, they mess it up.
Okay, Sean.
Yeah.
Got it. That's easy. It's easy.
Yeah, I've been to San Luis Obispo a few times. It's a nice area.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I don't necessarily want to stay here after school. It is a very small town.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to go back somewhere where there's a little bit more around. But I think it's been so great for these 4 years that I've been here right now. It's awesome. I love it.
Good for you.
Okay, I'm getting a text that we are live and it sounds so good.
Good. Outstanding.
So I will let you know in just 1 second as soon as their bio's done, and I'll give you an A-OK for you to start.
All right. Thanks.
I think they're almost done.
Okay.
Okay, they have let me know that the intro's done. And just so you know, I think I said it before, they're on a 30-second delay from us. So as soon as you open up for questions, there might be a weird little gap before I get anything.
Okay. No problem.
The floor is yours. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. Well, first off, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak. And so what I'll do is I'll start out by talking about kind of my story. It's one story among many, and I bet if you talk to 100 people that have had successful careers and successful lives, you will get 100 different ideas of what it looks like. So what I'm telling you is my story, and what I would ask people to do is if there are nuggets in there or things that I put out that appeal to you, do you say, yeah, that makes sense, take it. If not, no harm, no foul. So I'll just, put that out there that I don't expect anyone to say that, hey, everything I say is not right. Challenge me. Okay. So I was born and raised in New Jersey, Newark, New Jersey. First generation college graduate, but third generation military person. And so, it was a little bit interesting. So the reason that I joined the military to begin with was like a lot of people, patriotism, yes. However, I needed a way to pay for college. And so I went to Rutgers University and I graduated in 1989. So yes, I'm old. I got a degree in physics, concurrent with my commission in the U.S. Army Reserves. And if about the reserves, when you get a RTC scholarship, you owe a specific amount of time. So my contract was an 8-year reserve contract. And so I finished college, and then I went to dental school at the University of Pittsburgh. So finished college, met my then girlfriend, who was later, we got married. We both went to Rutgers, New Jersey, and then both went to University of Pittsburgh. I went to Pitt Dental, she went to Pitt Law, and stayed in the reserves for 4 years as a drilling reservist, and then finished dental school, and actually applied to come on the Army on the active side as an Army dentist. And that was right around the time of the first Gulf War, just ended, and the Army did not need dentists. So I had also applied for residency in oral and maxillofacial surgery at Martin Luther King Hospital in Los Angeles. And I got accepted there, and I think I got accepted out at UCSF, University of California, San Francisco. So I went to Los Angeles after I finished dental school, and that's when my spouse and I got married. She's not military. She's a civilian attorney, but and I'll go to one of the things I learned is you don't have to do too many things exactly right, but the big things you don't want to get wrong. And I'll tell you who you choose to marry, who you choose to be friends with, will affect your life, and we can talk more about that later. But fast forward, so graduation from college, 4 years in dental school, 4 years in the reserves, and then another 4 years in oral surgery residency training. And my reserve obligation was done at the same time that I finished my oral surgery training. So looking around in California, we were living in Torrance, California, South Bay. Loved the area, but really didn't want to stay in one place. So I actually came on active duty because certain specialties are very, very hard to hire in the military. Oral surgeons being one of those, so they snapped me up. And I will tell you, I never planned on making the military career. I thought, this is great. My reserve obligation was done. So when I came on voluntarily, it was initially for 3 years. My intent was to get board certified, get some surgical experience, and then find a civilian opportunity. So my wife and I, first assignment was actually here. I'm in San Antonio, Texas. We came here for about 6 months for some schooling, and I worked over in the hospital at Brooke Army Medical Center, which is now I'm the commander there, but that was 25 years ago or so. And so from there we went to Walter Reed in DC. That was a great assignment. Did a couple of years there, and I actually got a Maryland license and started practicing part-time. Now, one of the things that has really helped me and thing that's made the difference in my career is I've always had great mentors. And the thing that they always told me is, you may have a specific plan. Like for me, I was thinking, this is not going to be a career. It's a great experience, but I want to go out and make money and do all that kinds of stuff. And so I, got a license and I started practicing, but my mentors always told me that you always want to conduct your life and conduct your affairs in a way that, you have the plan A, but you want to make sure that you posture yourself so that you're happy if plan A works and you're happy if it doesn't. And so I had applied for fellowship training. So the military offers you different schools. Well, I had applied twice. I did not get accepted the first time. I got accepted the second time, right about the end of when my obligation was over. And basically, it's where the Army says, you're a specialist in something, right? You have this medical skill. well, you want to do a subspecialty or fellowship training in something, they basically wrote a check for me to go to any civilian institution for a year and study what I wanted to study. So I did a fellowship in maxillofacial trauma surgery. And so I went to the University of Texas Health Science Center in Houston in 2001, which in September 11th happened. And we went off to war in Afghanistan. We've been there, since then. Well, when I finished my fellowship, my assignment was at Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio, which is the only level 1 trauma center in the Department of Defense. And so I was very, very busy. Got here, loved San Antonio, bought a house. My wife got a job working here. And we thought, hey, it doesn't get any better than this. I started looking for jobs because, again, you do the training, you have an obligation. So I had like a 2-year obligation. And so right about the time that I started looking for other things to do, the Army offered me another opportunity to take a command position. So I went overseas. And by the way, that was the same month that I got selected for command to go overseas was when we got pregnant with our daughter, who's now 16. And so we had to make some choices as a family, right? But knowing that I loved the environment, my wife said, hey, just, I was going to a deployable unit, so I knew I would be deployed. And so they chose to stay here in San Antonio while I went off overseas. And so, and when I came back, I had gotten accepted for more schooling. Again, didn't really plan on it, but my mentors were like, hey, this might be good for you. Put your name in for it. And so the Army sent me, when I came back, I was working in the clinic for about a year after command. And then they sent me to Baylor University to do a master's in healthcare administration. And so went to Baylor, came back to San Antonio, and I was the residency director. So I had spent some time up to that point in my career. I had been, an officer in charge of a clinic at a hospital. I had the opportunity to deploy as a commander to Iraq. I had the opportunity to get a master's degree and fellowship training, and then they brought me back to be the program director at the hospital for the residency program. And then I thought, it doesn't get any better than this. This is great, but I was teaching, and because I had, there are very few dentists, the very few oral surgeons that have had command and the administration and and teaching. The Surgeon General at the time asked me to go to Human Resources Command for the Army, which is where all of the officer and enlisted assignments are made. And so for 2 years, I served as the chief of dental branch at Army Human Resources Command, managing the careers for all the Army dentists worldwide. And that was phenomenal experience. I was still able to practice part-time, keeping my skills up. Thought that was great. And then while I was there, I got selected for another command. I got promoted to colonel, and I got selected for another command. Got selected for the Army War College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. So we went to Carlisle, from Fort Knox to Carlisle to Joint Base Lewis McChord, where I was a brigade level commander out there. So I commanded, dental facilities. And from there, my tour got cut short because I was asked to come to DC to be the deputy chief of staff for the 2-star chief of staff at the Office of the Army Surgeon General, which they never had a dentist do that. And so once I got there, my family came. We have a home here in San Antonio. It's about the time my daughter started high school. So they came here. I went to DC, and I had that job for about a year. And then from there, I got selected as a 1-star general. And so the selection process is basically it's a congressional nomination. So the president nominates, and then the Senate confirms. So I went through that process, and so that was in 2018. I became the first African American Army dentist to make general officer, and the dental corps has existed for 114 years, I think, at this point. And then my first job as a general officer, I was in charge of personnel, logistics, and information management policy and programming for the Army on the medical side. And so I spent time in the Pentagon, basically 2 years in the Pentagon, running around there, learning that business. My second job as a general officer, I did that for about 18 months. And then they sent me to San Antonio, which was great because I'm with my family. And then my second job was the deputy commanding general for Army Medical Command, which is the worldwide, running the hospitals, the Army hospitals. And then from there, I did that for about a year. And then last July, I became the commanding general or CEO of Brooke Army Medical Center. Brooke Army Medical Center, also known as BAMC, is the only level 1 trauma center in the Department of Defense, which means we have, we do level 1 trauma. We have neurosurgeons on duty. We have 24-hour operating rooms, and we have teaching and research. So there are some criteria that make it a level 1 trauma center. But to give you a sense of scope, I'm in charge of a 345-bed hospital, main hospital, 5 outpatient clinics, a rehab center called the Center for the Intrepid, about 10,000 employees. I have an internal, office staff of about 200 that help me manage things day to day. We've got a clinic in Corpus Christi that does occupational health for the folks that fix military helicopters down there. And like I said, about 10,000 people that I manage and about $1 billion a year budget. So, and I'm the first African-American commander of BAMC, and it's been around since about 1859. And so just, in 2021, we're still talking about firsts. But one of the things I learned is that, it's interesting to me because, I think that it's great to be the first. It's nice, but I also know that I'm not the first who is qualified, right? The world, I think there are things that had to change in order for folks to be seen. I think the power of visibility of seeing diverse people is strong and very powerful. That we just recently had the first, the first female Army Surgeon General, was maybe 6 years ago, and so I think we still have a ways to go in terms of diversity and inclusion. But all in all, I'm very proud of the service that I'm able to provide. So that's my main job is the commander of the CEO of Brooke Army Medical Center. But because I'm the highest ranking Army dentist, I'm also dual hatted in law. I'm the Army Dental Corps chief. So basically, I advise the chief of staff of the Army on how many dentists we're supposed to have, how do we train them, what kind of equipment do they need to have, and any policies that we need to enact into law. And so I have a separate staff that does that helps me. Part of that staff is in the Pentagon, Office of the Surgeon General. Part of that staff is here in San Antonio. And so I wear kind of 2 hats. Right now, I think our end strength worldwide is about 1,100 dentists. So I basically help manage their careers. I'm trying to think of what else. BAMC has 39 graduate health education programs. So I'm effectively the dean for those programs. I was able to keep in practice full time up until about the time that I went to Officer of the Surgeon General in 2018. And so I still have a license, but I don't do the big surgeries anymore. I don't take call anymore because I just don't have time. Probably work about 7 days a week. So I'll tell you, when I started out as a college student, I did not plan on being a general officer. Nobody goes to dental school to be a dentist to think they're going to be a general officer. It's just, and if you've taken anything about the jobs that I just described, if you think about the last 4 or 5 jobs I've done, they have nothing to do with what I went to school for, right? It has nothing to do with physics. It had nothing to do with dentistry. It had nothing to do with oral surgery, but it's about leadership. And at this point in my career, who I am is a leader. I'm charged with managing time, money, people, space, and equipment, right? And that's really all I do. It's not all I do, but it's the main focus, right? And in order to do that, all of the previous experiences I've had in terms of leadership and just understanding how the Army works and how government works have really helped inform how I lead. And in terms of leadership, my leadership philosophy, I tend to think of leadership in four themes. So, and this applies not just to leadership in the military, but leadership in general, because I think as you become more senior in an organization, and just in society in general, as you get older and you accomplish more, people are going to be looking up to you, and how you carry yourself and the way that you lead, people notice that. And so I will tell you, the four things. So the first thing is the leader. I think, being a good leader starts with who we are as people. I think it's incumbent upon all of us because we all have biases. We all come from different backgrounds. We're raised differently. And when you're charged with leading an organization with people who come from all over the place, I think for some people, when they think, hey, my way is right, doesn't always work well. But it starts with understanding what your biases are, right? It starts with understanding what are your values, what are the things that are important to you, because people know if you're fake. One of the things I learned on deployment, and I went to Iraq and I led a unit and spread all over northern Iraq. And it's funny because during the workday, I've been a surgeon and I've taken call. I've worked long hours for years. But the funny thing is, when you're in a normal everyday office work environment, people can hide who they are. In other words, anybody can act right for 7 or 8 hours a day and then go home and they may have issues or concerns or life problems that they don't necessarily want people to know about. But when you are around people 24 hours, 7 days a week for 15 months, who they are and who you are will come out. And I think it's important that people, if they're serious about leading and about being a mentor to people and about really elevating their game, understanding who you are before, because who you are is going to come out in crisis, right? And the time to figure that out isn't when things are going wrong. It's to figure out your strengths and weaknesses in times of peace and in times of calm, so that you can react when it's necessary. And that can mean anything. That can just be, a lesson for life, right? The next thing I'll tell you is leadership is about the life cycle, understanding where you are in your life cycle. In other words, we all are going to have goals, okay? But a goal without a plan is really just a fantasy or a dream. And there's the saying that you can do everything, but you can't do it all at once. You can do anything you want, but you've got to know where you are in your life cycle so that you can sequence things in. And what I have witnessed people do over time is make decisions that cause them to curtail opportunities for themselves. Because, and I'll give you an example. And this is not right for everybody, but my wife and I waited to get married until we had met each other in college, and we followed each other across states, but we didn't get married until our education was done. And then we decided not to have children until board certification, and I was on my way in my career. And then at a certain point, my success, her helping me, enabled my success where she could stay home for 8 years and follow me around the world. And we couldn't have done that if we hadn't sat down and said, okay, what do we want to do? And then kind of figure out the sequence, because you can have children and go to college, but it makes it a lot harder, right? And that's fine if that's the path you want to take, but you have to know that. Don't let it happen by accident. Likewise, if people have dreams about becoming something that takes a long schooling time, well, you got to know that. You got to start early, right? I have seen people that started dental school in their 40s and 50s, and they can do it. You can do it if you got all these other responsibilities, but it takes a lot more energy and a lot more time. And so they're just things that, you know, whatever your life path is, if you have a sense of what you want out of life, you got to kind of map it out. And it won't be exact. There'll be bumps in the road. Like I said, I did not plan on staying in the military this long. I didn't plan on making it a career. But, and here's the thing, you don't have to be perfect. Every decision doesn't have to be perfect, but you can't do big things wrong, right? Remember I said, you know, time, money, people, space, and equipment. So the time management piece, learning how to manage your time is critical. Who you pick as your friends, your mentors, your confidants will have a huge impact on your trajectory as well. And one of the things I did right was I married the right person who was very, you know, who was complimentary to me. We're very, very different people. My wife and I are complete opposites. I'm an extrovert, and she, like, to do something like this, it would exhaust her. You know, she looks at my schedule and she doesn't know how I could do it. But we have shared values, right? And a lot of my friends and my mentors, they're not exactly like me. In fact, you know, most of my mentors are not people who are even who are even dentists, and some are not in the military, and they're male and female, and they're all kinds of backgrounds. But we have shared values, and by picking the right people, picking who you have around you, can really push you forward and help you be better. Yeah, so take your figure out your life journey and kind of try and sequence it. The next thing I would talk, the third thing I would talk about is legacy. And by legacy, I don't mean necessarily building monuments to yourself, but to me, legacy is two things. It's about getting mentorship and receiving mentorship. The only reason that I'm doing what I'm doing and I'm able to be where I am is because I have had great mentors. Now, granted, I have had to work really hard. I had to work full time, and I came from a background where, my dad didn't finish fourth grade, and we were a poor family. There wasn't money for college, so that's why I went to ROTC. But the problem is that it's not so much a matter of just working hard, right? Because my dad worked hard. I know a lot of folks that work hard, but if the hard work is not expressed in an environment where you're given choices and options to succeed, then you're just working hard and exhausting yourself. And part of what good mentors can do is help you from wasting effort. So, and then more than that, the hard work has to be, you have to have the right opportunities, right? And part of that opportunity is you got to have the opportunity, but someone's got to help you turn your head around and say, you need to go in that direction, because you can run in circles and tire yourself out, or you can go in one direction and get really far. And I think good mentors can help us often see farther down our life's journey than we can see for ourselves, simply because, if you don't have a point of reference for a particular career, you don't know what to ask. Like, I had no idea, what it, I grew up in the projects. I didn't have any idea when I went to college about exactly what I wanted to do, or exactly what it took to get in to dental school. But I had great mentors who could see something in me that I couldn't see for myself, simply because I didn't have a point of reference, right? And so that mentorship piece is huge. I think one thing that people struggle with is not knowing what to ask. Is saying, well, I don't know what to ask. That's okay. You find good people who will take an interest in you, who will listen to you and help you figure out what interests you and what your values are, and then ask them questions. I have learned to ask dumb questions, and I do it every day, because even now, I run an organization. Again, I'm a dentist, right? I'm not a CFO. I don't have the financial background. I have people that help me with that stuff. I've got a whole team. My job is to provide motivation, purpose, and guidance, and I understand, what they want in the Pentagon, and what my boss needs 2 and 3 levels up, and I know how to speak to people and build relationships. But I've got experts that help me run this large organization, right? And I have to ask them questions. And so asking good questions is really more important. Learning how to ask good questions is more important than thinking you have to have the answer, because the higher you get, the less you really know. You right? The less you really know, and the more I see, the less I'm sure of. And so the better you can get at asking the right questions and finding those people who are going to help you get where you need to go, the better off you'll be. and don't be embarrassed. Don't think, well, this is stupid. There are no stupid questions. The only stupid questions are the ones you don't ask, right? Because you can fail all by yourself, but it takes a village to help you succeed. Likewise, for me, as I become more senior in the Army, I have fewer years ahead of me. I have to retire at some point, and I have, more people behind me. There are more people that look up to me than people I can, people that I can get mentorship from. And so part of the job of a good leader is to make sure that when I, hang up the uniform and move on to my next life's journey, that I leave enough people in place, good people who are going to carry the ball. And so it's incumbent upon you as you become more senior to find other people to mentor. And the thing is, it doesn't, there's one of the problems is that people tend to pick mentors who they're comfortable with. And it typically means, if it's a female, another female, if it's a white male, they pick a white male. And that's not good. And the reason is because, I don't need to ask myself what I think. If I pick somebody that's just like me, then I'm not learning anything. And so the people that I have as mentors span a variety of backgrounds. Everyone from I have a mentor who's a female corporate CEO engineer who was the first engineer of a Fortune 500, first CEO of a Fortune 500, female CEO of a Fortune 500 company, and completely different background, non-military, but has similar values. And I appreciate the way that she carries herself and she leads, and I read what she writes and I read her interviews. And so I pick up a lot of pearls. Likewise, a lot of people that I mentor don't look like me and haven't had my background. And some of them are not even, in the Army Medical Department. But there are certain aspects of leadership, of being successful in life that have nothing to do with race or gender or color. They're just, they're just good pearls and tips. And so it's vitally important to get mentorship and to give it. And then the last thing I would say is lifelong learning. So the way that we adults learn, right, is typically we have our institutional schooling. So get your degrees, get your certifications, get your licensure, get those things that you can hang on the wall to say I'm trained. But then the way that you actually get it to stick is you have to do it, right? You read it, you learn it, you take your tests, but you got to put it into practice. So you got to have the institutional piece. Then you've got to have the on the job training in order to know, not just what to do, but then how to do it well. But the last thing that a lot of people don't do is the dedicated self-reflection time. So not only, you have the degrees, you do the job, but then am I doing it right? Or is there something more that I'm missing? And so that expertise is they say the confluence of reason, experience, observation, and deliberate practice. And that deliberate practice means that I'm consciously thinking about when I made that decision or I did this surgery, what was the outcome? And yeah, it worked out, but could I have done something better? Right? You'll see this a lot when people who have been fabulously successful in high school go to college and just get blown out of the water because they're challenged differently. It's because they didn't reflect, what they were doing right, or maybe they were successful because the work wasn't as hard and now they've got to study. I've seen people who have been fabulously successful in one area of life because they're comfortable, step into another arena and it requires a different skill set and they're not thinking about that, they're not prepared, and they suddenly get, disenchanted because, well, why isn't this working out? So that's critical. In terms of mentorship, I talked about that. I think that's probably one of the most important things. Another thing is, I said earlier, being successful is not about being perfect, but it's about getting the big things almost right and not doing any big things wrong. Of course, watch what you put on social media. These days, nothing on the internet dies. Be careful about, we are all Americans. We are free to express our views, but just understand that that's out there. If you say something or put something out that could be viewed as inflammatory, just understand you will be held you'll be held to account. You have the right to free speech, but other people have the right to judge you for it. So be very careful about that, because I see a lot of younger people put stuff online because they reshare things. Just realize that down the road, you may be trying to get a security clearance, or you may be looking for a job in a sensitive area. And the things that you've said 10 years ago, 5 years, they're going to come back, and you're going to have to be held to account for it. Um, um, who you choose to spend your time with, people who are heading in the same direction. It doesn't mean they have to be, like I have a really good friend, a good mentor, who's a carpenter, right? It's not a doctor. I have great friends who are plumbers. It's not about their education level, it's their values, and what level of pride do they put in their work. And I get mentorship from them as well, because they manage businesses and they manage people, just like I manage people. So I think I'll stop there. It's about, wow, this is about 35 minutes. I'll stop there and see if there are any questions. How about that?
Perfect, sir. Thank you again so much for speaking. That was awesome. So I'm going to take a look at some of the questions that we have from the people that are in the world. So the first one we have says, was it ever difficult to move around so much in your career for you or your family?
That's a great question. So I'll answer it this way. Yes and no. The moving wasn't hard, but remember I said that life cycle thing and thinking ahead. We had to have a very deliberate conversation at a point where it looked like my career was going to take off, and we had to sit down and think through it, because if you're on active duty any length of time, you will have to move. And there are some other jobs that are like that as well, not just in the military. And once we kind of made the decision, we came to the conclusion that, hey, Sean likes what he's doing. Melanie can kind of take it or leave it over here. Then it was easy. It was an easy decision, and it didn't have to be a permanent one, right? And it wasn't a permanent one. My wife, took off from work for a few years, and we moved around a little bit. And then once it became kind of apparent that I was I was in the running for general officer, they decided to come back here, meaning San Antonio, and stay in one spot so that our daughter could go to high school. And then I commuted from DC on weekends for 2 years, and that was a conscious decision. So was it easy? It was an easy decision because I love what I'm doing, and I know it doesn't last forever. But it was a sacrifice for the family, right? But if you enjoy what you're doing, and it's aligned with your values and the thing, because I love what I do. I've had great assignments and I've had a lot of fun. The decision's been easy. Then it's just the mechanics of, hey, how are we going to do this, right? If I had been in a different situation where it was not, this lifestyle was not compatible with family happiness, then I'd be doing something else.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. Let me grab another question. Maybe this is a quick one. It's do you have any books that you recommend?
Yes. So the first one that comes to mind, actually a couple. So if you've ever read Aristotle's On Rhetoric, and I love philosophers. So Aristotle's On Rhetoric talks about the rhetorical genius, meaning what makes a leader. And I look at it in terms of what makes a leader great. He talks about logos, ethos, pathos. Logos meaning, as a leader, if you're going to be leading people, you have to be a good communicator. You have to be able to speak logically, soundly, and in a way that people can understand. Ethos. He talks about ethos. Are you viewed as an ethical person? You say something, do people believe it? And that speaks to reputation. Very, very important in the military as you get more senior, because it's not necessarily what you know, but are you trustworthy? Are you viewed as being a valid, when I speak, people take it to the bank, right? And then he talks about pathos, which is passion. Do you have a passion for what you're doing? Are you viewed as someone who makes the team better? And so I would read Aristotle's On Rhetoric. Another really good book is Growing Physician Leaders. by Lieutenant General Mark Hertling. He's actually not a physician. He's a line Army officer, but he talks about how, how doctors, people with a very, very technical skill, because if you think about it, one of the hardest transitions for people like me to make, right, is very, very highly trained in one thing, one area, and it tends to be something that we care a lot about. I see this with engineers and architects and mathematicians. They get very, very down in the weeds, not realizing that the average person really doesn't care that much, right? So, as a general officer, nobody cares, how well I can do a procedure, but can you relate to and understand where people are coming from? Can you take people from diverse backgrounds and get them behind a common purpose? What does that look like? So those are two I'd recommend. There's another book called Tackling Wicked Government Problems that I really enjoy because, one of the things about leading at the strategic level is that the levers of control, the things I'm responsible for, a lot of the levers of control are not within my grasp. The budget, so I have a budget, I have an annual budget. Well, I'm also told who I need to treat, what are the measures of performance, what are the measures of success, who you have to hire, that kind of thing. And so, if I'm given a problem to solve organizationally, I don't necessarily control all the levers. I have to depend on Congress. I have to depend on our, our congressmen, our higher level command. I've got to depend on, I get orders that come down from the Secretary of the Army or SecDef. And so, but I'm responsible for the outcomes, right? So that takes a lot of relationship building, understanding where people are coming from, even when they don't share your values. If they're from a different organization, they may have values that are, not necessarily aligned with your interests. Understanding how to build those relationships, understanding how to disagree with people without being disagreeable, right? All those soft skills.
Perfect. We have another question that says, why did you choose the Army versus any of the other branches? Would you stay Army if you had the chance to choose again?
That's a great question. And I don't know how to answer that because I joined the Army because Army ROTC offered me a scholarship. And honestly, and I stayed Army because not because of the uniform or not. I mean, I love the Army, but I love the people. It's always been about people, and that's why I've stayed. Right, I never intended to make this a career because, to be frank with you, based on my skill set, I could have made more money. Right, I could have gone out in the private practice. There's a lot of things I could have done, but the way that I've been mentored, the people, the friends that I've made, I've never had, knock on wood, I've not had one bad day. I've had days where it was busy and things were tough, but in my career, and I've been a commissioned officer, I've been on active duty now about 25 years. I've been commissioned for a total of 32 now. I've never had a bad day. I've never had a day where I'm like, why am I doing this? Because there is a bond, and you know this because of the Civil Air Patrol, right? There's something about you wear that uniform, but it's more than just a piece of cloth. It represents the fact that you've all come together and you have a common bond because you share a common experience and common values. Now, that's not to say that there's anything wrong with the Air Force or the Navy. I think the Air Force has some great assignments. I think they have some wonderful places. The Navy, I never wanted to be on a ship. That's just me. But I love the Army because it's what I know. But I would say whoever, honestly, if you're looking for scholarships, you go with who gives you the best deal, because if your first goal is to get through school. And for me, the Army ROTC program just offered me opportunities that the Air Force didn't have a presence. Well, they did have a presence, but it wasn't really a great program at Rutgers at that time. That's been years ago. But I would say look around and go with whatever service suits you, because at the end of the day, that's why you have to know yourself. What are your values?
Exactly. Awesome. Let's see another one. You mentioned that you are airborne qualified. Someone's asking, what's the process for someone in the medical field to go to airborne school?
So when I did it years and years ago, I did it as a cadet. And so when I at Rutgers, now if you're medical, typically you have to be assigned to an airborne unit. So if you want to be airborne qualified, you typically have to, when you come on active duty, you have to request an assignment with an airborne unit. And there are medical airborne units, just like there are medical positions in special forces. There are medical positions in paratrooper units. There are medical positions and all. So you typically are gonna ask for the unit type, the type of assignment that you want, and they'll do the training for you. They'll train you, whether it's airborne, aerosol, that kind of thing.
Perfect. We have time for a couple more questions, so let me grab another one. Here's a question. Is there a key moment or an influence which changed the way you lead or communicate?
Yes, I would say there were a couple of, I would say, capstone moments in my career. One of the biggest ones, honestly, was becoming a father, and I'll tell you why. Um, who you are at 18 and the life experiences you have are going to be very different than the ones you have at 28, and 38, and so on and so forth. I think for me, I understood what teamwork was about, right? But I think once you have kids of your own, at least for me, you tend to realize that, hey, when I lead and when I took troops into combat, that's somebody's kid, and I know how I feel about my daughter. And so once I started to make that connection, I saw people a little bit differently. Not to say that I treat them differently, but I have more empathy and a greater understanding that one of the great things about being a medic. I'll explain it to you this way. One of the great things about being part of the military health system is that I look at us, meaning docs, nurses, physicians, PTs that serve in uniform, as serving a vital role in making sure that there's a covenant between the United States government and the American people, that when they send their sons and daughters, right, their kids, into harm's way, that they're going to get the best care possible anywhere in the world. That we're going to pick them up on the battlefield, keep them alive, take care of them, and get them back to rehabilitated. And so as a parent, right, I am fully aware that if I have a young trooper that's with me and they're under my wing, I understand implicitly as a parent how other parents, how worried they are, and how important it is that they're well led and that they are taken care of. And so that's one thing. The second thing I would say is, and that's a life thing. That's not really a career thing, but you talk about self-development and understanding yourself. The other thing I would say is a crucible moment for me was my tour of battalion command, where I led a unit in combat in Iraq. Because up to that point, my career had been focused on being the best surgeon I could be and making sure that I was technically proficient. Well, the thing is, when you go to deploy and you're downrange, you really get to understand not just what you do, which is your craft, but why you do it. And why we do it is to make sure that we can project power, make sure that our combat veterans are well taken care of. Because if you take care of people, you can keep them in the fight. People know that they have a great system behind them. It gives them comfort, just like it gives, like those parents I talked about, gives them comfort that if something happens, they're going to get taken care of, and the care is going to be the best in the world. And so it really helped. It really helped me as a leader reframe my thinking about what it means to be an Army doctor. That it's not just about doing your craft, but it's about being a good officer, about being a good leader, about making sure that you, like I said, that you take care of people, because no one cares how great you are at doing procedures if they don't feel like you care about them, if they don't feel like they're well led, if they don't feel like their leadership is communicating with them and telling them what's going on, that they feel like they're part of the team, right? And just being good at procedures doesn't get you there.
Awesome. So it's that like bigger perspective, not just your technical skills.
Right.
Okay, I think we have time for one last question.
Okay.
Let's go with um, I know you mentioned earlier that you've never had a bad day. You've had challenging days.
Yes.
So what's the biggest challenge that you've faced in your career?
Oh goodness. Which one? Well, I'll tell you a challenge that happened recently. So I took command of Brooke Army Medical Center, this behemoth place, in June of 2020. And about 2 days after I took command, you all know that, this very reason that we're on the Zoom call is because of this COVID environment. And so one of our missions, one of my missions as the hospital commander is that we treat about 250,000 beneficiaries. But that's what we do. But remember, I said the why. The why is so that we can deploy people when they're needed. And so at any given time, as a commander, I've got a number of troops deployed all over the world, medical troops. Now we don't put that information out because of national security. So what people see when they drive by the hospital is this huge complex, and they think, well, they have all this, they can take all these patients. I say that because the week that I took command was right around the time that COVID rates started to rise in South Texas. Because at first it was the Northeast, and we sent troops to New York and California and some other hot spots. Well, then during midsummer, Texas started to become a hot spot. When that happened, local politicians, local civic leaders started to ask, hey, we're getting overrun. We have this huge military hospital right here in our city. Why can't they take some of our patients? Well, one of the things I said before is you manage time, money, people, space, and equipment. And you're always limited by your limb fact, right? Your limiting factor is when you're running a healthcare system is usually people, it's not space. So when people drive by and they see this huge hospital, they don't necessarily understand that half the folks are deployed, right? I can't tell them that. I can't go on the news and say that. So here's what happened. We get this demand, and politicians do what politicians do. And there was an article that came out, and it actually made national news. And the headline was something to the effect that Brooke Army Medical Center sits idle while San Antonio in crisis. Okay. So that article came out at about 10 a.m. that day. And about 2 o'clock, I get a call from a member of the U.S. Senate, member of the U.S. House, rather. So I get this call, and it's a politician, not one of our elected officials, calls and reams me out because why aren't you helping the city? Why are you folks? I've got reports that that people aren't busy, and you've got nurses and doctors sitting on wards filing their nails, right? Literally. And so, again, you've got to always have the narrative. So I had to quickly turn that around, because this is becoming, what happens here, because we're a big medical center, starts to ripple effect. And now the message is, hey, you guys aren't doing your job. You're not helping us. And so I had to quickly turn around with my public affairs team, with our congressional affairs contact office, and help them understand, without breaking security rules, that yes, we'd like to help, but number one, the law doesn't allow it. I can't just take, we can't use misappropriate government funds. But number two, I don't have the capacity, because by the way, at that very same time, the local hospitals were telling us we weren't helping. Half my critical care nurses were deployed to local hospitals. They were working in their wards, helping to keep them afloat. But the narrative playing politically was, you're not helping us. Well, part of being a general officer is understanding the politics and knowing that, hey, sometimes you just have to take the shot. And there's a saying that some days you're the bird, some days you're the statue. And sometimes I have to be the statue and just take it, and make sure that, those below me don't get that heat. So that's an example of a recent incident that happened. So sometimes you'll get calls from, constituents that don't get what they want, or you'll get calls from, I get calls from congressmen or members of Senate asking, questions. And that was one that was interesting. But in terms of, that's part of the fun though, right? Because at the end of the day, I'm not fired. You have tough conversations, but then you go, okay, well, how can I handle that better? And what I learned was, the critical lesson I learned was, you have to be able to look out in the environment and figure out what's important to people. So I had to start engaging the politicians. I had to start making monthly meetings so that I can understand what are they under pressure to produce, what are the things that are important to them, and then craft the messaging ahead of time. And so from that one incident where I got a bunch of nasty phone calls and bad press, that drove us to start doing monthly town halls. So now every month I do a virtual town hall. It's on Facebook. If you go to the Brooke Army Medical Center website, Facebook page, every month I do a town hall and I take questions from the field. I take questions from the community and we answer them up front, because if you don't tell your story, somebody else will tell your story, and they will twist it and turn it in a way that's good for them. I started doing press releases, learning how to be active with the press, even though some of them are not friendly. But again, you got to get your message out. Learning how to deal with politicians. I'm not a politician. I have a very, very defined left and right set of limits, but it's about understanding what pressures they're facing and then trying to get to yes to help them or craft the message. But yeah, I've learned a lot. I learn something new every day.
Amazing. With that, I think we're out of time, and unfortunately, we have to vacate this space for another instructor to come in.
Yep.
Thank you so much, sir, for coming and speaking. I'm looking at the chat, and everyone is going crazy. They're like, "Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir."
Thank you.
They really appreciate you coming to speak. So with that, thank you so much for speaking. If you don't have anything else, you can just leave the Zoom call. It was so nice to meet you, sir. It was so nice to get to chat.
Very nice to meet you as well. I wish you all the best. Please continue what you're doing. And Civil Air Patrol is a wonderful program, and it builds character, right? It builds character. So keep on doing what you're doing. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Have a great day.